Okay, for this next step, I'm going to go ahead and paint the flames that are on these torch bases here. And I'm going to use a fairly small brush. This is a brush like you'd use to paint miniatures with. And for the white, first of all, we have to start with white paint. I have found that most paints, yellow and reds, are transparent colors. So paints you usually use for miniatures, reds and yellows, are easy to see through. So if you don't put white down under it, they're not going to show up as bright. Now at this point I've given this 2 coats of white paint because my craft paint that I've chosen here is kind of a cheap craft paint, so it took 2 coats to get it a nice bright white. I'm going to attempt something that I haven't really attempted before. It would be, I'm going to try to put a glow around each of these flames. I'm going to use a kind of a nice soft brush, but this isn't a huge brush. This is kind of a brush that's about as wide as the flame itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush white around it, because I could just dry brush yellow around it for a glow, but it wouldn't really glow because the gray would show through the yellow and just dull it all. And one other thing is I don't want the front of this torch to glow. The glow is actually coming from behind, so what I'm going to do is protect the front of the torch so I don't accidentally kind of over dry brush onto the front of the torch. To do that, I'm going to use some masking tape, and this is the painter's blue masking tape, but regular masking tape probably should work fine. What I'm going to do is simply just take and cut a strip from it. I'll cut a couple of strips, but what I want to do is I want to put it across the front of the torch. And so just only the inside of the torch is going to be lit up. So I'm going to put it across the front, and it's going to kind of go across the side like that. Now for the next step, I'm going to dry brush the yellow on, and it should show up now that I got white underneath it. Now next I'm going to dry brush a little bit of red. I'm not even cleaning my brush out. I'm just going to go straight from yellow to red. Now this I don't want to go crazy with. I just want maybe a hint of red around the outside. Now this next part is going to be kind of tricky to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush, I'm going to get water in it, make sure the brush is wet, and I'm going to paint, I've got a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow, both poured out on a cup that I can use it. What I'm going to do is blend from red to yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the yellow because I want this to be bright yellow. The flame needs to be bright yellow all the way up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start all the way up with the bright yellow, start at the bottom, and then go all the way up to the top. Something like that. And I want the tip to be pretty bright yellow there. And the flame is going to be a little more red at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe some of that excess yellow out on the brush, and I'm going to get some red, but I'm just going to barely get the tip of the red in. Just a little bit of red, not hardly any red at all. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting red at the bottom. And that red is going to be at the bottom, and you can see as I go up, it's going to slowly start turning orange because it's mixing with the wet yellow that's there. So I'm just going to slowly go up, and I only really want to do this on the parts that stick out. I don't want to go, I don't want to get down into the crevices with it. I just want to kind of go on top. So something like that. So that'll blend it up just a little bit like that. Now it looks like the very bottom really should be a little more red. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to dip a little more red. And the very bottom, I would really want to be a little more solid red on the bottom. So I'm going to go across the red with the bottom there. And then I'm going to wipe out whatever's in the brush. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take and kind of pull this down a little bit. pull that down in there a little bit. Yeah, something like that. And then I'm probably going to go up and I'll try to get a few little bits maybe to kind of come up like that, just on those outside ridges that are coming up, just like that. Okay, with the torch painted, we're going to put on the final top of the roof on the tower. Now there's two ways you can do it. The way I'm going to choose to do it is on these four little short pillars that we have. I'm going to put the diamond a little bit higher up rather than getting them upside down. Most people wouldn't care if you accidentally got them upside down. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in an X shape on each side of the torch. So if we do that and put them kind of here and over here. Now, if you have a perfect X shape like this, the roof is not going to fit quite like we want. If you try to put the roof on like this, you're going to find that it doesn't really look like it's going to work because these little wedge-shaped pieces are going to be hanging over and not sitting on top of the pillar. In order to get that to work, we have to change the X a little bit. In other words, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pull these two sides up a little bit and pull these two sides down a little bit. So it's kind of a squished X. And if we do that and put this on here, that will make it wide enough so that these angle pieces will sit right on top of the pillars just like that. And don't forget to glue the torch down into the middle of the central ruin here. The next thing you'll want to do is to paint the dirt color of paint around all of the bases completely. So any place that's gray that's on the ground or white, you want to be sure to paint that over brown. Also be sure that you really paint the front edges of this well and get a good coat of brown along the front edge of the foam. Okay, I'm going to start putting the ground cover on the bottom, and what I've got basically is ground foam scenic materials from Woodland Scenics. I've got a variety of colors and a variety of textures. You know, 4 or 5 different ones are probably fine. I try not to go too far out and have any really dead grasses or yellows or anything. We've got such a small area on the bottom to do that I thought too many colors would be a little bit too distracting. What I've also got is, this is a mixture of half tacky glue and half water. That's what I'm going to paint on to stick the ground foam to. Oh, and I also have a little bit of dirt. This is actual dirt that's just been ground up, and I'm going to sprinkle it on areas where there's a path or where people have walked. Okay, so I'm just going to find a spot. Usually what I do is I start on one side and work my way around the model and then end up at the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start probably about right here. I'm going to take our mixture of glue, and this should be fairly thin. You could almost use Elmer's white glue straight out of the bottle and it would work just fine as well. Now when you're done painting this area, what I would do is I would take your brush and I would just kind of rest it in a cup of water so that that glue does not dry onto your brush. And then what I'm going to do, you can either use a spoon or you can use your fingers. I'm going to use a variety of colors, and I want them kind of grouped together a little bit. Kind of pretend you're doing a camouflage pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle a little bit on one place, and I'll use a different color. I'll scoop it up and I'll sprinkle a little bit of a different color down. And sometimes it's a good idea if you have the coarser turf. This is kind of a more clumpier looking. It's better to start with that. This can kind of represent small bushes. So what you can do is kind of push it on and kind of jam it down in a little bit. So find a place or two for the clumpier stuff. I would apply it first because once you put the fine stuff down, the fine stuff kind of takes all the glue and then there's no room left for the clumpy stuff. But if you start with the clumpy stuff, there are places around that glue is not being hit, and when you sprinkle the fine stuff on, the fine stuff can still get down into some of those smaller areas. And also, if there's some areas that are bare that you want to use for paths, you can take a little bit of the dirt, that's actual dirt, and you can kind of sprinkle it on some areas too, because there's some areas that grass simply isn't going to grow. Now a spoon is a really nice idea if you want to get down under places that your fingers can't reach. So like underneath the arch, you can kind of use a spoon to shake stuff out down there, or wherever you've got a pathway that people have walked. And one thing that makes it easier, I've just placed like a clothespin or just something underneath of here. And what it does is it kind of holds it up off the table. And that way when you're painting, you can actually paint towards the edge, all the way towards the edge without it actually painting on the tabletop. Now if you want to do vines on this, you can. I would do it very sparingly. I would only do it on places that don't have a lot of detail. Because things get too busy, you just kind of confuses the eye. So I would take kind of a bare wall. And what you want to do is you want to pretend, you know, if you're a vine, you kind of follow up the cracks that go on. And you might kind of, you know, fork out occasionally, but you don't, you just a couple of places is fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Aleene's tacky glue here, and I'm just going to apply it straight from the bottle. Usually vines are probably about the same width going on up, so I'm just going to go and I'm going to kind of follow the line going up on the side here, kind of crawling, sometimes going across to the side and maybe up a little bit. And they can be a little blotchy, they can be a little uneven. This one right here I might kind of veer off to the side and go up, maybe kind of crawling into the window. Now that you've got the glue on there, just take one of the colors and I'm just going to sprinkle it on, you know, kind of like you sprinkle glitter on glue, something like that. And if you like, you could probably gently push it in just a little bit to make sure it adheres well. I'm sure it'll adhere just fine. And then we'll tap it off. And so what you'll have is you'll have something like that's just going to be kind of crawling up there.